Have you ever thought that you could avoid most troubles simply by keeping your mouth closed? The hardest blows you have taken throughout your life did not happen because of what others did to you, but because of the words that came out of your own mouth. In a moment of excitement, you revealed your secrets. In a moment of anger, you ruined your relationships. In a moment of distraction, you missed the chance of your life. They all had one thing in common. You spoke where you should not have spoken. You opened yourself to people you should not have opened to. If you still wonder today why you have not reached where you want to be, first look at the words that come out of your mouth. If you are stuck in the same cycles, the reason is not what you have lived. It is how you tell what you have lived. Because sometimes the biggest enemy is not what others say, but what you say and cannot take back. Therefore, real power is being able to govern your tongue. This video was prepared for you to learn to manage the power of your language. It is time to use your conversations not randomly, but to empower yourself. You do not have to suppress your emotions, but you must abandon the language that drags and limits you. Because every word out of your mouth either frees you or makes you the master of your own chains. Now, to give your mind a new start command, write this sentence in the comments. From today on, I speak only to move forward. This sentence will be the first solid seed you plant in your subconscious. Because what you repeat turns in time into what you live. As Epictetus says, a wise person speaks carefully, because rather than being a slave to the words that come out of the mouth, one prefers to be the master of silence. If you are ready, we begin. 1. Stop telling what is happening in your life. Sharing what you have experienced may create a first feeling of relief. Letting out the emotions that have piled up inside may feel like it lightens your load. But when you tell the same stories over and over, you unknowingly make these pains a part of your identity. Constantly voicing the negatives that happen to you deepens the events in your mind, and over time creates a new label that belongs to you. Thus, your past settles at the center of who you are. You become someone made up of what happened. You cling to your past pains, and you struggle to see the new roads that lie ahead. The point here is not to deny what you have lived. The point is not to open new wounds to yourself by endlessly repeating your pains and lacks. Because with each telling, the story in your mind deepens more and turns more into a permanent identity. The events you experienced are only your experiences, not your identity. But if you keep voicing them, they become your identity over time. Some people feel the need to talk about their problems before starting or continuing a conversation. At first, this looks like a need to vent, but over time you see that they have fallen in love with these stories. Suffering gives them a kind of sense of privilege. As their pains are told, they feel special. As they are listened to, they think they are approved, and this in time turns into an emotional addiction. Every word they say, every complaint they voice ties them more tightly to their comfort zone. Because if the problem is always outside, then they never have to change anything inside. What if you did the exact opposite? If instead of repeating your problems, you started to talk about your dreams, if you talked more about what inspires you and less about what limits you, if you changed your story, how would your life be right now? You do not have to claim everything is fine. We are not talking about denying your feelings. The matter is to elevate your awareness and to notice the narrative you choose to repeat. Because the story you repeat becomes your reality. If you constantly focus on what hurts you, you build a mindset of scarcity in your mind. This is like watering weeds every day. But if you start to talk about what beautifies your life, what makes you feel alive, what ignites your soul, your energy changes. Your conversations stop being tiring and become inspiring. You begin to see yourself differently, and everyone notices it. Most of the time, we believe that talking about our problems makes us more real, more sincere. But in fact, most of the time we do it to avoid the responsibility to act. Telling everyone that you have no money, that you are stressed, that you cannot do anything else is easier than facing real change. Because real change requires silence, introspection, and above all, consistency, and this is frightening. Therefore, people tend to fill the gaps with unnecessary words. However, if you truly want to heal, grow, and progress, you must stop telling and start living. Stoicism teaches us to look inside and focus on what we can control. And there is always something in your control: your inner and outer speech. Epictetus says what affects us are not events, but the thoughts we have about those events. If you say every day my life is hard, your life truly becomes hard. But if even in the middle of chaos you speak by saying I am strong, your mind slowly begins to align with that strength. Therefore, start to choose your words more carefully. Not because you have to impress anyone, because what you say becomes what you believe, and what you believe becomes what you live. Maybe you cannot change the situation you are in today, but you can change your story, and believe me, this alone has a transformative power. When you focus on what you have, on what you can do, on what inspires you, your life will begin to open. New people, new opportunities, new ideas, everything starts to turn in your favor. Not because luck has changed, but because you decided to stop giving so much power to what limits you. Therefore, stop telling what is going on in your life. Start to tell what you want to create. Then get up and live them. 2. Your words teach others how to treat you. What you say does not only tell who you are, it also teaches others how they should treat you. Every word, every sentence you use gives instructions to the people around you. Approach me like this. See me like this. If you use an insecure language when you talk about yourself, people approach you in that way. If you use a language that constantly complains, says I cannot do it, shows yourself as inadequate, your environment perceives you as a victim. They often do not do this consciously. But your words, your posture, your energy quietly whisper to them who you are. A person who expresses themselves calmly, clearly, and respectfully does not create the same perception as a person who speaks while being tossed in emotional turmoil. This is not role-playing. It is not hiding behind a mask. This is not suppressing your emotions, but consciously choosing how to express them. During an argument, when you are carried away by your anger and you shout, you give this message: I cannot manage myself under pressure. But if you can control yourself even when you are angry, if you can speak clearly and decisively, without raising your voice, you convey a completely different message: I am not a slave to my emotions. This difference directly affects the trust and respect people feel for you. Someone who can control themselves gives confidence. Someone who can keep their stance, even in moments of chaos, instills a sense of stability in those around them. Most of the time, we unknowingly sabotage our own story with our language. If you constantly speak of yourself by saying, I always fail, you not only engrave this message into your own mind, you also issue an invitation for others to see you that way. If you do not determine how you should be treated, others fill this gap as they know. Therefore, carry clarity and resolve in your language. Be clear when tired, be clear when angry. Because the words that teach the most are those spoken in these difficult moments. Being strong does not mean shouting. Influencing people does not mean forcing yourself to be accepted. Real strength is being able to speak with consistency and determination even when your emotions flare up. Your body language, the look in your eyes, the small silences between words, all of these carry silent but very powerful messages, and most of the time how you say something is remembered more than what you say. This means your conversations should reflect not your weakness, but your conscious stance. When people meet you, they should gain this impression. This person has self-mastery. This person knows how to show respect both to themselves and to others. Expressing your emotions is never a weakness. Real strength is not in suppressing your emotions, but in sharing them in a balanced and conscious way. This is how real connection is formed. But remember, spreading your inner emotions uncontrollably around does not bring you closer to people. It only fills the environment with noise. Healthy bonds are born from openness that is built with measure and awareness. Stoicism teaches exactly this: to strengthen your inner control and to make your words not merely a tool for venting emotions, but a reflection of a consistent character. As Marcus Aurelius says, speak only when needed, and let your words be both kind and firm. You do not need to raise your voice or surrender to your emotions to express yourself. Real power is knowing when and how to speak. To take words with thought and awareness without being dragged by the storm of emotions. True influence is born here. And remember, people treat you as you treat yourself. If you value yourself, others value you. If you pay attention to your own words, others will pay attention to what you say. So steer your life with your words. Let your strength be felt in every sentence. And remember, your way of speaking does not only describe you, it builds who you are. 3. Do not narrate the process by which you improve your life. When you are in a process that carries your life to better, you do not have to tell every step, because the early phases of change are delicate. An intention that has not yet taken root can be easily blown around by external influences. Even a word spoken with the best intention, a comment, or a criticism can plant seeds of doubt in your mind. At the start, you may have a strong intention. You may want to change and grow with a great desire. But this intention is not yet strong enough to withstand the voices of the outside world. The first steps of the change process proceed on an invisible ground. Everything is still fragile. Therefore, you should not weaken this new orientation that is still crawling with early disclosures. When you enter a change process, it is tempting to share it. Talking creates a sense of achievement. It makes you feel as if you have accomplished something. But this is a very dangerous illusion, because you are still at the beginning of the road. Real change strengthens not by telling, but by continuing in silence. When a person starts to build a new habit or makes a difficult decision, as they tell this process to their circle, a reward mechanism is triggered in the brain. Without having achieved anything yet, by telling, one lives a kind of false success feeling. This blunts the real power to act, because the mind that received its reward early loses the desire to struggle. Change strengthens by being lived, not by being narrated. When you tell something, the reactions of the outside world mix into the process. People sometimes support, sometimes instill doubt, sometimes reflect their own fears onto you. Sometimes praise that looks well-intentioned relaxes you earlier than it should, and this causes you to stay in place instead of advancing. And remember this: not everyone can understand your change process, because change is a personal battle. Some will belittle the struggle within you, some will downplay your change so as not to see their own failures. Real transformation does not need spectators. Real change grows within with a silent determination. Therefore Stoics say do not tell your philosophy live it. The word of Epictetus is the key here. Do not try to prove that you are changing. Do not tell. When it becomes visible, you will not need to explain anything to anyone. Especially at the beginning, protect your process. Do not toss it to the wind of the crowd while it is still fragile. External comments, whether criticism or praise, can distance you from your true intention. Because early approvals encourage you not to take steps, but to stay in place. You may find yourself stopped halfway when nothing has been completed yet. So what should you do? Keep your change hidden. Keep your effort to yourself. Be the quiet, unseen hero of your growth. Consolidate self-discipline within without telling others. Because real success is not to polish your image in the eyes of others, but to strengthen the relationship you have with yourself. Remember, the more valuable the thing you build, the more carefully you must protect it. Every goal at the beginning is vulnerable to external effects, and unfortunately the world is not a place that waits to understand or support everyone's change. Therefore, first strengthen your roots. First build a fortress within. Give yourself a quiet promise every day. Today I take one step on my own path. Do this without needing to tell anyone. Do it with inner belief, calmly and resolutely. Because in the end, success declares itself. Real change grows in silence, and when the time comes, it surpasses even silence and becomes visible to everyone. Then there is no need for words. Your presence speaks. For the promises you give yourself shape your life. The most important promises we give in life are not to others, but to ourselves. Because if you do not keep a promise you gave to others, you damage your reputation. But if you do not keep a promise you gave to yourself, you damage your character. And once your character is worn, every area of your life is affected by it. When you give yourself even a small promise, for example, waking up early, working every day for a specific goal, communicating more consciously, this promise becomes a building block in your subconscious. If you keep this promise, the feeling "I can trust myself" forms in your mind. But if you break it, an invisible crack forms inside you. I am someone who cannot do what I say. Most people pay more attention to their words against the outer world because they fear being shamed in society. Yet the real danger is not keeping the promises you give in front of your own eyes. Because when you fall from your own eyes, no one needs to belittle you. You already experience a belittling inside. If you take lightly the weight of the promises you give yourself in time, you also take lightly your goals. A promise, a goal, a dream, they are all connected. Therefore, as the Stoics teach, working on your own inner discipline is the greatest victory. As Epictetus says, having mastery over your own will is superior to having mastery over the whole world. First, you must learn to master your will. Start by keeping small promises. Because someone who cannot stay loyal to small promises can never reach big goals. When you say to yourself in the morning, "Today, I will work for this goal," see it not as a mere intention, but as an order. Because the promise you give yourself is a secret agreement between your mind and yourself. Even if no one sees you, you see. Even if no one knows, you know. And remember, a strong character is born not from the gaze of others, but from the scale of your own conscience. Each day you can stay loyal to yourself, your self-confidence grows a little more. Because then you do not need the outside for motivation. A person who trusts their own word does not lose their way even in a snowstorm. Because they take power from within, they are not dependent on the applause or criticism of the outside. From now on, give small promises and implement them with great seriousness. Give yourself a promise each day that you can keep. Let it be small but solid. In time you will see. As the promises you give yourself accumulate, you build an invisible power in your life. And most importantly, you do not have to tell anyone. By keeping the promise you gave to yourself, you already gained the greatest respect. The respect you feel for yourself. Because the greatest transformation begins not for others to see, but for you to be proud of yourself. 5. Rewrite your story. Every word you use is not only a reality you tell, it is also a brick with which you build your future. Every "I am always like this" draws a new boundary in your mind. However you define yourself, your mind adapts you to that mold, and in time that mold begins to govern your life. Therefore, the words with which you write your story are far more important than you think. What you lived in the past, your pains, your failures, are of course real, but they do not mean who you are. They are only parts of your journey. If you constantly define yourself through the breaks you experienced, everything you lived in the past will continue to govern your today and your tomorrow. Yet your life does not have to be a repetition of the past. Many people turn what happened to them into an identity. They say, "I am like this." They say, "I always lose." These sentences may seem like simple expressions by themselves, but they are actually commands sent to the mind. And the mind does not question the command it is given. It works to implement it. That is exactly why you can begin to change your life by changing your language. The Stoics teach this too. Seneca says we may not change the direction of the wind, but we can set our sails accordingly. That is, a thing that happens to us is neither good nor bad by itself. The meaning we load determines its effect. A failure can be an end for some, while for another it is a powerful beginning. When you decide to rewrite your story, you give a new direction to your life. Instead of saying "I cannot succeed," you begin to say "I have not succeeded yet, but I am improving." Instead of saying "I am unlucky," you say "I am working to create opportunities." These small word changes lead over time to great mental changes. Because if your language changes, your belief changes. If your belief changes, your behaviors change. You may have experienced painful experiences in the past, but you do not have to recall and relive those experiences every day. You can carry them, yes, but not as a load on your back, as a lesson in your pocket. The difference lies in how you tell it. Pay attention each day to what you tell yourself. How do you speak to yourself? Do you constantly emphasize your lacks? Or do you feed your potential? Every sentence you use is like a seed you throw to yourself. And remember, whichever seed you water grows. Do you water your lacks or your potential? From today on, rewrite your story. Do not be trapped in your past. Build a new language, a new perception, a new identity. Because who you are is shaped not by what you lived in the past, but by what you believe today. And most importantly, you do not need anyone's approval for this transformation. Be the author of your own story. Remind yourself each new day, "I am not the result of my past. I am the result of my choices." 6. Speaking discipline is the reflection of inner discipline. Every word that comes out of your mouth does not only give a message to the outer world, it is also a mirror of your inner world. If a person cannot control their tongue, they cannot control their emotions, and someone who cannot control their emotions cannot govern their life. Knowing when and what you will say is not only a communication skill, it is a sign of deep inner discipline. If there is chaos inside you, this certainly reflects in your words. Anger, fear, resentment. If you carry unresolved emotions inside, these leak into your words at the most unexpected time. They show up as behaviors such as criticism, sarcasm, outbursts. But if you have established an order inside, your words are orderly too. Even your silence carries a sense of trust. Some people see speaking without a filter as a virtue. They say, "I say whatever comes from inside." Yet there is a very thin line between honesty and thoughtlessness. Honesty is to express the truth consciously. Thoughtlessness is to vomit the emotional turmoil inside. Saying everything you feel instantly is not courage. Real courage is to be able to express everything you feel in the right time and in the right way. It is to be able to choose words, to be able to remain silent when needed, and to know that even your silence carries meaning. Impulsive words are the ones that bring the most regret. A word said in a moment of anger can open a wound that will be carried for years. A sentence spoken at the wrong time can shatter trust, and some words have no remedy. They cannot be taken back. Therefore, discipline must exist not only in behaviors, but also in words. When you are angry, shouting is not disciplined, breathing is. When you are hurt, attacking is not disciplined, thinking is. When criticized, jumping to defense is not disciplined, listening with calm is. Stoicism is very clear on this. To establish mastery over our words is to establish mastery over our soul. Every word that comes out of our mouth either elevates us or diminishes us. Therefore, before speaking, pause and take a breath. Does what you will say truly carry value? Does it truly contribute? Or is it just a product of a momentary discharge? Every word either builds a bridge or builds a wall. Either makes your life easier or harder. And most importantly, it reinforces who you are inside. To add discipline to your language is to add discipline to your life. To add awareness to your speech is to add awareness to your existing. A person who knows the time of speaking and the value of silence is in harmony not only with people, but also with life. And the greatest power is not to silence others with words, but to govern oneself with words. Remember, speaking is easy, but being able to remain silent is the sign of true power. 7. Silence is a powerful tool for managing stress and anxiety. Most of the time, to beat stress and anxiety, we try to do more. We talk more, we explain more. We keep our minds more occupied. Yet what we most need is sometimes to do nothing, to stay silent. Silence is not to suppress our emotions, but to truly hear them. Because when you are under stress, your mind starts to work fast. Thoughts stack uncontrollably. What you could not do, what you must catch up with what you did wrong. In this turmoil, finding a right solution becomes almost impossible. At that moment, stopping and taking a breath, staying silent, creating an inner space for yourself is of vital importance. When you stop for a moment and choose silence, the stormy surface of your mind starts to calm down. You can observe the turmoil inside. You can distinguish which thoughts are truly important and which are just the product of panic. Silence gives you a chance to take one step back. That step creates a chance to look at events from the outside and to give a more conscious response. Many people fear silence because in silence you have to face things. With the fears you suppressed, with the questions you postponed, with the burdens you carry inside. Yet real healing begins exactly with this confrontation. When instead of running from your emotions, you can observe them objectively, you are no longer their prisoner. For Stoics, silence is not an escape, but a source of power. Marcus Aurelius often speaks of the practice of inner withdrawal. No matter how complicated the outer world is, a person should have a quiet place to take refuge inside. That place is found only in silence. Not in phones, not in arguments, not in hectic activities. Therefore, in your stressful moments when anxiety rises, or when you feel everything is coming down on you, what you must do is not to talk more, not to toil more. It is to stop for a moment, to take a deep breath, to choose silence. To see silence not as a void to fear, but as a healing space. This pause of a few seconds can shape the big decisions you will make in the future. Because silence allows your mind to refocus, your soul to calm, and most importantly, to make contact with your own inner strength. There is a solidity you can find there without needing any external approval. Remember, silence is not weakness, it is mastery. And the greatest mastery is to be able to preserve your inner silence even in the middle of chaos. 8. Do not share your deepest fears. The deepest fears you encounter in your life are like wounds that have not yet healed, and like an open wound, they can get worse in the wrong hands. Opening the fragilities you carry inside to everyone is not always a sign of strength. On the contrary, when opened early and to the wrong people, it leaves you more vulnerable. Even if people are well-intentioned, they may not be at the maturity to understand, carry, or respond with sensitivity to your deep fears. Sometimes what you say is taken lightly. Sometimes you may encounter responses that unintentionally hurt you more, because no one can know your feelings as deeply as you do. And therefore, telling every emotion everywhere is not freedom. It is a trap you set for yourself. While doing this, our expectation is usually this: to be understood. We want someone to truly hear us, to grasp what we feel. But the truth is that unless you make peace with yourself, seeking approval from others makes you weaker. Deep fears are emotions that you have not yet fully faced within yourself, that you have not yet processed. Therefore, when other people's doubts, belittlements, or comments are placed on them, your self-trust erodes further. Stoicism draws a very clear line here. Seneca says most of what we fear consumes us before it happens. Before sharing your deep fears, you must transform them in your own mind. You must recognize them, look at them with an objective eye, and cleanse them of emotional outbursts. Only then, when you speak of a fear, will it be an expression of awareness, not a cry for help. If a fear still aches inside you like a heavy wound, you must first share it with yourself. You must entrust it to your silence. You can write in a journal and face it in moments of quiet thought, because silence is the greatest healer of deep wounds. Fears you heal within yourself become more resistant to the effects of the outside world. You must learn to protect the most sensitive parts inside you. You do not have to display every emotion. Being strong is not explaining everything, it is knowing how to express everything at the right time and in the right places. Some things are sacred and should not be laid out before everyone's eyes. Real power grows in inner silence. Remember, your wounds are sacred ground, and to whom you open them determines what kind of future you will build on that ground. If one day you will share your fears, do so only after they begin to heal, and even then choose consciously to whom, how much, and for what purpose you will share. Do not open your deepest fears to everyone. Strengthen them first in your own silence, because silence is where healing begins, and the fears of a healed soul are no longer chains. They are the key to freedom. 9. Gossip is a silent poison. Every person you talk about leaves a trace in your mind. That trace either gives peace like a clear lake or turns into a muddy swamp and makes your thoughts heavy. Talking about the lives, mistakes, and lacks of others first looks like an innocent chat. It even makes you feel part of the group. Talking about the lives, mistakes, and lacks of others first looks like an innocent chat. It even makes you feel part of the group. Yet gossip is an invisible debt. First, it consumes the reputation of the other. Then it consumes your character. Every word that carries someone's privacy from mouth to mouth eventually takes a piece from your credibility. Because this poison that sounds sweet when heard darkens the tongue and the soul when swallowed. Gossip is the shortcut to comparing yourself with others. As you talk about someone else's fall, you forget your own shortcomings for a while. Thus, you escape from the real effort of growth that requires self-discipline. The Stoic concept of prohairesis, the power of inner choice, comes exactly here. Independent of external events, you decide what to speak and what to keep quiet. Marcus Aurelius says if you cannot repair another's flaw, at least do not voice it. Every word is either a tool of repair or a tool of destruction. There is no other option. When a gossip starts, you feel a small thrill inside. Notice it and stop. Ask this: when I say this sentence, whom do I serve? If your answer is neither me nor the person in front of me, then choose silence. Stoic silence is not suppressing emotions, but eliminating the unnecessary. Thus, your mental energy turns to real aims. Virtue, productivity, inner calm. Gossip does not only present judgment about others to you, it also makes you constantly judged. Because when a community picks apart the flaws of one member mercilessly, everyone knows their turn will come. This collective distrust chokes even the most creative ideas. In an environment where mutual respect reigns, minds open boldly, while in communities poisoned by gossip, caution replaces innovation and masks replace sincerity. That is to say, the more negatively you speak about others, the more defensive walls you build around you. In the end, this wall imprisons you as well. You may ask, should criticism never be made? The line between criticism and gossip is hidden in your intention. When criticism is directed straight to the person, it is a tool of repair. When gossip is made in the absence of the person, it is a power game. Epictetus gives a clear advice. If you do not have the power to correct, do not complain. If you will complain, then improve. That is, if you are not part of the solution, silence is the most virtuous stance. What can you do in practice? Build a conversation filter. When talk starts behind a name, ask yourself, does this information place a responsibility on me that requires action? If the answer is no, politely change the subject. Use mirroring. Ask the person who starts the gossip, have you considered saying this directly to X? This moves the talk to the plane of responsibility. Most of the time, the wave dies at once. Reinvest your time. 10 minutes of gossip a day becomes 1 hour a week, 52 hours a year. Think of devoting that time to learning a language, reading a book, walking. Your character balance turns positive immediately. Switch to praise gossip. If you must talk, share others' successes and virtues. Voicing someone's goodness elevates your spirit too and builds an environment of trust. Remember, gossip may look like a bond in the short run, but in the long run, it gnaws relationships. Knowing that similar sentences will be spoken in your absence creates a constant state of alert in the background of the mind. That alertness is the biggest enemy of real peace. Real strength is not putting someone else's reputation on the table. It is quietly raising your own reputation. From now on, use your tongue not to magnify the weaknesses of others, but to strengthen your own virtue. Because every moment you choose someone else's story, you add a bitter taste to your own story. Let the words that come from your mouth build bridges that carry you forward rather than walking behind others. And remember the Stoic principle. Someone else's word does not define you, but your word leaves you bare. 10. Being a good listener is a true display of presence. Today, everyone wants to speak. Everyone wants to be heard, understood, to stand out. Yet real power is not in telling yourself everywhere, but in being able to remain silent when needed and to listen with your whole presence. Being a good listener is not just a social skill. It is a sign of deep presence and strong awareness. Because when you truly speak with someone, not only what you say, but how you listen is decisive. Listening without interrupting, without judging, without preparing answers in your mind. This is a rare skill. Most people pretend to listen. In reality, they only wait for their turn. True listening starts when the ego goes silent. When you are a true listener, the person in front of you feels valued. When you turn to what they say with full attention, you hear not only their words, but also their feelings. With your gaze, your posture, your silence, you give the message you matter, and this creates a deeper bond than you think. This understanding is important in Stoicism as well. As Epictetus says, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Let us listen twice and speak half. Because we listen not to change the person in front of us, but to accept them as they are. Without judging, without trying to correct, when you truly listen to understand, people feel safe next to you, they lower their masks, and real communication begins. Whereas when you try to explain yourself by speaking constantly, you lose the person in front of you. Because everyone mostly wants to be listened to. Good listening is not only giving a gift to others. It is also a gift to yourself. Because when you listen silently, you grasp people, events, and life more deeply. You learn that you can be impressive without speaking, that you can change an environment with your presence. Remember, people most remember those who listen to them. And real charisma is born not when you make yourself speak the most, but when you make others feel valuable. 11. Speaking without thinking brings regret. All of us at some point in our lives have wished to take back a word before we even said it. But once those words come out, there is no return. They settle in the mind of the other. They damage relationships. Sometimes they leave traces that last for years. That is why speaking without thinking is not just an impulse discharge, it is often the cause of heavy regret. When you speak while an anger explosion is happening inside, you are not actually thinking. You are only swept by the flow of your emotions. And the words said at that moment mostly represent not your real thought, but a temporary emotional storm. A sentence uttered in anger can echo in your relationships even much later. That is why learning to remain silent is not only politeness, but a kind of power and wisdom. Turning every emotion that accumulates inside into words instantly means pouring your inner world into the outer world in an uncontrolled way. True mastery is to be able to choose what comes out of your mouth consciously, even when storms rage inside. This is not to suppress your anger, but to manage it in the right timing and the right way. Stoicism teaches exactly this. When something happens, instead of reacting immediately, we must create a pause between the event and the response. Because true power does not lie in following the first impulse, but in watching that impulse and choosing the appropriate reply. As Marcus Aurelius says, being the master of one's own soul is the real victory. So how is this done? First, hold the words that are about to leave your mouth in your mind for a few seconds. Look at them. Will this word really solve the problem? Or will it only be a reflection of an emotional discharge? if what will be said will cause a lasting harm to the other or to you remaining silent, is the greatest wisdom. Even if impulsive words provide short-term relief, they cost much heavier in the long run. In a discussion, you may feel like you want to defeat the other side. But the real victory is to be able to speak without losing yourself, not with anger. When you act with awareness, you show respect both to the other and to yourself. Especially in moments of conflict, your words can be as sharp as a sword. But the real skill is not to swing that sword at every opportunity. It is to keep it in its sheath when necessary. Because some battles are won before they begin. Sometimes saying nothing is more effective than thousands of words. This is only possible when you have self-control. If you do not immediately externalize everything you feel, you stop being a prisoner of your emotions. Your words become chosen, effective, valuable. Remember, words are invisible weapons. They either build a heart or break a heart. So before you speak, think of the echo your word will create. Look not only at whether what you will say is right, but also whether it is constructive. A word can be both true and destructive at the same time. Real wisdom is the art of saying the truth in the right way. From today on, gain this discipline for yourself. Take a breath before you speak. Wait for the emotion to pass, and then speak. Because every word you utter is a silent but powerful declaration of who you are. Imagine that you are walking in an ancient forest the morning after a destructive storm. The smell of pine is still in the air, the ground is wet and heavy. Only two kinds of trees remain in front of you. The first are slender trees famous for their scenic beauty. But because their roots are shallow, the storm has uprooted them. Their trunks now lie on the ground like broken bones. The second looks humble from the outside. Its bark is cracked, its branches are crooked, its leaves sparse. Yet it still stands upright. Because its true strength lies not in its flashy leaves, but in its deep roots that no one sees.